you start talking about something and it shows up more and more on your algorithm, that has definitely been happening to me as we've been starting this histamine spectrum series. I don't know about you guys or if you have noticed it with yourself as well too. And I love that it's getting more time in the sun. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of more attention, I think, being given to this histamine conversation, especially in the post-COVID era, because histamine at its core is an immune molecule, right? We've been talking about this over the course of this series. And so when we think about the immune system involvement, of course it makes sense that it's been way more prevalent post-COVID, right? And more individuals were we definitely having histamine issues pre-COVID? Yes, ma'am, of course we were. But what we're seeing more and more are some of these more histamine related comorbidities and diagnoses that are all being shared under this histamine umbrella. And then individuals out there are thinking that they have all of these seemingly separate like terms and diagnoses assigned to their medical chart. And it's just not true, right? They're all very much related. And that was my goal going into this overall histamine series, was I just wanted to bring some light and some education to these individuals that feel like they're kind of swimming in circles out there and or barely treading water because nobody has helped them connect together a lot of these seemingly separate diagnoses really into one cohesive thought process. So the cool thing about it, like I said, is that this histamine conversation is definitely getting more time and attention. We've already done multiple episodes about these histamine spectrum conditions, all the way to how they show up in gut health, and a lot of times are like mislabeled or are mistreated, in my opinion, and also how they show up in neurological health as well, between migraines and anxiety and brain fog type of situations as well too. So in both the physical body health and our mental health, these histamines can be running the show for quite a few people. And in those situations, they are the ones that are falling through the conventional medicine cracks and also the functional medicine cracks as well too. I swear if I see one more person come into clinic that has been put on multiple different antihistamines, either you're like over-the-counter antihistamines or they come to me and they're on quercetin and stinging nettles and vitamin C and DAO enzyme, I'm like, yeah, we're not getting it, right? We're not really understanding that while some of these like antihistamines or even a low histamine diet recommendation aren't bad, they are just what I would call a bailout strategy. And they are a Band-Aid bailout strategy at best. And so what I want to do today, and really talking and bringing more light to this overall histamine spectrum condition, number one, that was my first goal, is for people to start to have these light bulb moments go off and they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me that things like IBS, SIBO, migraines, anxiety, PMS, PMDD, hypermobility, chronic rashes, dysautonomia, POTS, MCAS, like all of these are all histamine spectrum conditions. I'm like, yes, ma'am, they are. Absolutely. Right. And so what a lot of times people, number one, they just aren't getting that connection made for them. And so of course their treatment is going to be limited at best. And then when we do connect the puzzle, I see so many individuals who are getting mistreated. Even when we understand that all of these are rooted in histamine, what's happening is we're mistreating that ultimate histamine picture. So since we've really come a long way in discussing what types of labels and diagnoses kind of fit under this puzzle, if you've been following along, you've been starting to notice something about this. And once you look at the body through that connected lens, you really can't go back, and you start to understand how even in my practice too, I become someone's medical detective, right? And really starting to put a lot of these pieces and puzzles together. You're not just looking at symptoms anymore. You're starting to recognize overall patterns. And the pattern recognition is really where the magic happens, because patterns are where, like I said, we see the gut and the brain and the immune system and the hormones. They're all involved at the same time here. And patterns where things like histamine, which we're talking about in this specific scenario, histamine isn't just showing up in one place, okay? It is showing up across multiple different systems and therefore is going to contribute to multiple different symptoms. if we're just stuck in this symptom management loop, we're going to miss the forest for the trees. We're not going to be able to zoom out and really understand that there is a very clear pattern emerging here. And in my style of holistic medicine and what I train other practitioners to learn and see too, we are pattern identifiers, right? We're going to identify patterns. We're going to look at overall system dysfunction. We're not out there treating symptoms, right? Because then we're not really doing anybody really a fair service. So by this point, a lot of times when individuals do recognize that like they have some of these more histamine spectrum type of conditions, they start to kind of source their own medicine, which is great. And a lot of times they've tried changing their diet, either avoiding high histamine foods, or they've tried multiple different antihistamines like H1 and H2 blockers, or supplemental antihistamines. They've tried multiple different digestive enzymes or DAO enzyme, and yet the pattern just keeps coming back. Right? And that's why we really have to zoom out and understand what is the ultimate framework that's driving this dysfunction. And if we just keep treating this as like an antihistamine bailout strategy, these people are going to continue to not have those practitioners that are well educated to help them understand where to turn. Okay. Because this is the picture that I am seeing with individuals who are coming out of conventional medicine, or honestly even coming out of functional medicine as well too. I met with a mom and a daughter today who very clearly on multiple testing knew that they had histamine issues, but all they were on was a bunch of antihistamines, and all they had been handed from this naturopath is about 3 different antihistamine supplements, 3 different probiotics, and a low histamine diet, which is very restrictive for someone that's 10 years old, right? And telling them to like not have leftovers and like not eat avocados, right? It's like very restrictive diet. And I was like, what are we doing here, right? We understand the situation at hand, but the treatment of it is far from fully understood or fully vetted out. So just to kind of, like I said, zoom out and make sure we're all on the same page here. Usually someone is not new to the healthcare system if you are having some of these histamine spectrum conditions, because like I said, you've been given multiple diagnoses. Maybe you've had one or more of the following: IBS, SIBO, chronic migraines, PMS, PMDD, dysautonomia, POTS, chronic hives, you name it, right? A lot of or hypermobility or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, like these are part of that histamine spectrum condition. And depending on what provider you're working with, really depends on the approach that you might have gotten in terms of overall treatment in this. So conventional medicine, usually each of these people involves a different treatment plan. The nervous system gets its own treatment plan. Hormones get their own specialist and treatment plan. Often this is just managed with like a bunch of ologists, right? I have a rheumatologist, I have a neurologist, I have a gastroenterologist, I have an endocrinologist, and really it's often just managed with a bunch of just seemingly separate medications to control the symptoms, but don't necessarily explain why the body is so reactive in the first place. What has the immune system so overfired up? But then the focus might turn into people looking for more answers and might seek out more of a functional medicine perspective, right? They think this is it. This is where I'm going to get the answers that I've been looking for. But this is also where I see a really major disconnect here, because the focus then becomes, okay, yes, all of these things are connected together. Let's get to the root cause of it. And the root cause of it is histamine. Not untrue, right? So the plan becomes, here's a low histamine elimination diet. You're going to avoid these foods. Here's 5 different supplements that are all just natural antihistamines layered together when needed. And while these approaches can provide temporary relief, they often become the whole strategy, right? And you just get, like I said, temporary relief, but not true resolution, because nobody is asking the most important question that my brain just can't help but look at. And I'm like, why is the histamine system overloaded in the first place? Why is nobody addressing that, right? And this is where I'm about to walk you through a model that I find incredibly helpful. And it's something that is part of my holistic medicine methods. It's something that I teach my practitioners within my 12-month mentorship program that I run. And it's something that I also speak to with my patients as well too. And it is a concept that I call the histamine bathtub, okay? Yes, I'm going to be talking about a bathtub. Follow along. It will make so much sense in a second. So what I want you to envision when you think of these histamine spectrum conditions and histamine spectrum disorders, and especially anything involving the immune system, is a bathtub, okay? The bathtub gets full and eventually the bathtub overflows. And when the bathtub overflows, these individuals are going to get flare-ups, okay? And in those flare-ups, it could show up in the gut with excessive bloating, GI discomfort. It could show up in the skin with hives and breakouts and flare-ups. It could show up in the neurological system with like a panic attack and anxiety, a migraine situation, right? Or in like a dysautonomia, you get lightheaded, you get imbalanced, right? It's like you're going to have some sort of flare up in this situation where the histamine bathtub overflows, okay? Sticking with our bathtub analogy, we really kind of think of three ways. There's kind of three major ways where we can treat this bathtub scenario. Number one, if someone's bathtub is overflowing, I could hand them a bucket and I'm like, here's a bucket. Start bailing out the bathtub. And they're like, okay, I'm scooping up the bathtub. I'm scooping it out. I'm scooping it out. That's what an antihistamine does. Okay. So if someone's told you to do Zyrtex and Benadryls and Claritins or Pepcid, which is another H2 blocker, or like quercetin, stinging nettles, DAO enzyme, or a low histamine diet, all someone has handed you is a bucket, which is great, but they've handed you a bucket and you're just expected to bail out the bathtub. Cool, great, awesome. We might get that bathtub not overflowing anymore, but that is exhausting because every single day, multiple times a day, every day, you're gonna have to bail out that bathtub, okay? So someone could hand you a bucket and that looks like a low histamine diet or either over-the-counter or herbal antihistamine supplements or histamine blockers. When I think of a bathtub, right, in my growing up around home improvement projects, I think about the plumbing situation here, right? It's like, so when we have a bathtub, I'm like, and the bathtub's overflowing, number one, someone shut off the water. Like, what is the source of the water that is filling the bathtub? Where are the histamines coming from? And second, someone pulled the dang drain. Right? It's like, why is the drain clogged? Why is the drain not draining these histamines out? So when I think of the histamine bathtub, I'm not just going to hand someone a bucket. That's mean. That's rude, right? That's exhausting. I'm going to start to think about what's the source of the water and how am I going to pull the drain? I think both of the sides of those treatments can be beneficial for different people at different times. And every body that walks into my clinic, even if 5 different people walk in and they're all experiencing different types of histamine spectrum conditions, the treatment's going to be different for all of them. But the treatment's going to go back to this bathtub because we have to evaluate what's the source of the water and why can't someone pull the drain. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through these just a little bit. I'm not going to go quite as in depth as I do with my practitioner training program. So if you're a fellow practitioner out there or wanting to, like I said, learn more about this from like a career and coaching aspect, definitely go check out my 12-month mentorship program so you can dive a lot more into the physiology behind this. But let's just take, for example, the source of the water. Why is the faucet on? Okay, if our bathtub is overflowing, somebody turn off the faucet. That is where histamines are continuously coming into the body from somewhere. Either the body is endogenously producing these histamines or there are bacterial, fungal, or parasitic pathogens that are producing a histamine response in the body. So the biggest contributors here are histamine producing bad guys in the gut. Certain microbes have the ability to produce histamine and increase our overall total load. Number 2, what also produces a histamine response in the body is blood sugar dysregulation. Blood sugar highs, blood sugar lows, individual riding that blood sugar roller coaster, expect extra histamine release. Nervous system activation, aka stress, absolutely can exacerbate that response. And then specific to females, hormonal fluctuations can also amplify histamine release, especially the times of the cycle where estrogen is fluctuating. Estrogen and histamine are kind of besties, okay? So the more that you learn how to talk to a female too and start to realize how does she feel throughout her cycle, how does she feel during different times of the month, can clue you off really well of like, that happens to be a time of your cycle where estrogen is the highest and you feel miserable, right? So that is probably a clue around histamine. And as long as the faucet is on, that bathtub's going to continue to overflow, okay? So we have to do that medical investigative work to decide and decipher with that person that's sitting in front of me. Everybody's different, but with that person sitting in front of me, what is their source of the water? And how am I going to turn that off? Maybe I need some functional testing to help me answer that question. Maybe I need some blood work to help me answer that question, but we need to be the medical detective and help determine what is their source of their water. And in water, in our case, is what is the source of the histamine coming into the bathtub. The second side of the treatment is the drain. Everybody loves to forget about the drain, okay? We want to kind of think about like, ooh, what are the bad guys that are producing histamines? I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But also we can make a lot of headway by pulling the drain. And the drain is how our body is clearing histamines out of the body. So we may be producing them, but are we then clearing them out at a fast enough clip in which we're producing them? So this is where our body was designed to clear histamines effectively, but that system depends on multiple different processes. Number one are overall digestive enzymes, okay? There are some very key digestive enzymes that are made in the lining of the small intestine. They're called brush border enzymes, and these brush border enzymes are designed to help break down histamine so that we can then poop it out is how we get rid of histamine. But a lot of these enzymes either are damaged because we have gut issues or we have leaky gut, or if we have nutrient deficiencies, vitamin B6, vitamin C, copper, magnesium, zinc, we need all of these for these digestive enzymes to function properly. Also, we have to go back to the liver and bile flow. Bile is a biggie here. If someone is having histamine issues, I'm absolutely looking at bile, no question. If we have sluggish liver, sluggish detox pathways, poor bile flow, that's going to impact our body's ability to clear histamines out effectively. Bowel motility. I mean, if you're not pooping, we're not releasing histamine. So we're going to have to look at the multifactorial approach of their overall bowel motility, which sometimes bile and digestive enzymes are connected to bowel motility as well too. Hydration and mineral balance is a big one. When you think of pulling the drain, you think about our exit pathways. Pee, poop, sweat, and breath are really the four major exit pathways. So we need to be thinking about hydration and kidneys. We need to be thinking about bile and bowel movements, right? All of these things are going to be very, very important in overall histamine clearance. So I get to evaluate that person sitting in front of me. I can very, very clearly see based off of their symptoms, I'm like, your histamine bathtub is overflowing. Instead of just handing you a bucket and a bailout strategy and being like, good luck, I'm going to be that medical detective. And I'm like, what's the source of the water? Shut it off. Why is the drain clogged? Let's open that bad boy wide open. Okay. Because that to me is a holistic medicine treatment. That's what functional medicine to me was designed to be, not just handing someone like a bucket and a bailout strategy and a prayer, okay? That is your like antihistamines, DAO supplement, low histamine diet. I'm not saying that these things are wrong. I'm not saying these things are wrong. They can be incredibly helpful, but they are very temporary and they don't turn off the faucet. They don't fix the drain, and you're going to be stuck bailing out your bathtub every single day, and it is exhausting, okay? So when I think about this, like I said, from an overall like patient perspective, this might be brand new, like the light bulbs kind of start to go off a little bit. And when you start to see things through that holistic medicine lens, you kind of can't unsee it. You're like, oh my gosh, yeah, all I keep getting handed is these like bucket bailout strategies. And like, what are we doing? Like nobody is helping me understand what's the source of my water, what's the source of my histamine, and what are the things that are clogging or keeping my drain from being wide open. Those are the parts of the treatment that really become the most effective, both short-term and long-term, and give someone an exit strategy from some of these bucket bailout methods, right? So if this is something that you know you've been dealing with, whether any of these like histamine spectrum conditions, you suspect some of these things underlying, this is where we can do a lot better than some of those Band-Aid solutions. So if you know someone who is struggling, please share this with them. That is my ultimate goal and passion, is just to get this education out there so that individuals have access to like practitioners like myself, or practitioners that I train and give you access to them and their mentality and their toolbox as well too, so that we can really spread this type of treatment for more individuals to have accessibility to. If this is you and you're interested in meeting one-on-one and figuring out what your sources of your histamine bathtub overflowing are and truly get to the root cause of that, head to the link in my bio. You can click there and schedule a one-on-one functional wellness consult where we will start with some labs and we'll help start really deducing this puzzle picture down for you. And in the meantime, share with your friends, and we will see you guys next week for more Learn with Lo.